Thank you everyone for staying with me. So I'm trying to, this talk may be going to be a little bit surprising, but you'll see. And I will talk in related to, as Connor has already announced, something that I related to a coming book, Recursivity and Contingency. Now let me start. In the opening page of Du Monde, Simondon starts by describing the tension between two monster concepts, culture and technique, and tell us about his ambition to reintegrate technology in culture. When I say two monster concepts, what is culture? What is technique? What did Simondon understand as culture and as techniques? He has no explanation. Is he talking about Western culture, or is he talking about Greek culture? He's talking about Chinese culture, Japanese culture? What kind of techniques is he talking about? The French word technique, and it's also the same in German, has been understood in the 20th century philosophy of technology either as the Greek techne or modern technology, and this was the case in the 1949 lecture of Heidegger, The Question Concerning Technology. So I repeat, either Greek techne or modern technology emerged out of what we now call European modernity. So these are the two limited understanding of technique. But of course, we should question, as there are many cultures, there are many techniques, and that is what I called a multiple cosmotechnics. So this is the opening. The question, this tension set up by Simondon. Culture, according to Simondon, developed a misunderstanding of technology, therefore failing to integrate it. So for example, when one sees a robot, one immediately thinks of it as either a slave or a dangerous betrayer that may conquer us later. Now the task of Simondon in this case is to demonstrate that the robot does not exist, and this is a way for him to integrate technique in culture. And this is, in the first part, in the introduction, the definition of culture is very limited here, as we can say pop culture or a stereotype. And he wants to demonstrate that the robot does not exist. I quote, "It is not a machine, no more so than a statue is a living being, but that merely a product of the imagination and of fictitious fabrication of the art of illusion." End of quote. The refusal of the existence of robot can only be advanced by the study of the evolution of technology in the epochal relation between human and technical object, which Simondon has outlined as a progress. Sorry, I forgot. As a progress from technical element, which is characterize the 18th century. This optimism about progress. Two technical individuals, which characterize the machines of industrialization of the 19th century, and then to the technical ensembles, which characterize the 20th century cybernetic machines. And in different epochs, the relation between human and technical object is different. When the automation machine gained the status of a technical individual, meaning that it possessed its own associated milieu, workers who have been craftsmen working with elements. Element here does not mean technical elements, but rather nature, what they call nature, with the pre-Socratics. So the craftsman failed to adapt to these machines, and this leads to a malaise. This technical lineage is indicated by the complexification and concretization of causality in operation. To overcome this problem, it is necessary to have an anti-mechanical organization, and I emphasize an anti-mechanical organization, and this is something from Conquilin, which is organic and holistic. Thanks to information theory in cybernetics, he developed the concept of open machine, which is to be distinguished from the automation, the automaton repeating only the same predefined task. An open machine has a margin of indetermination, meaning that it has a mechanism which allows it to tolerate irregular input, such as the process of sound filtering and amplification. The concept of open machine has been mistakenly, I emphasize mistakenly, considered a critique and even overcoming of cybernetics in Simondon's work. In 2015, I published an article titled "What is a Margin of Indetermination?" in the review Implications Philosophiques, and I raised a question towards the end of the article which I was not able to respond to, because it has been really confusing until this moment. The relation between Simondon and the cybernetics has not been completely clear for me. And my question was the following: in what way can we say that the moth, so this is a machine, it's called a moth, like the butterfly, the moth, you know, the same type of thing. In what way can we say the moth of Nobel does not possess a margin of indetermination? So this is the moth, and it can chase the light. It chases the light. It can correct itself. There's auto-regulation. The margin of indetermination that Simondon talked about is key to the definition of the open machine. Yet the open machine also seems to me to be a realization of Norbert Wiener's notion of feedback. If this is the case, Simondon's critique of automatism seems to be outdated by machines today endued with complex mechanism of feedback, which I call computational hermeneutics. Because technical objects such as smartphone, computers, and different kinds of softwares, hardwares, no longer operate with the same type of automatism that Simondon criticized in the 1950s. On the other hand, we confront the technological system described by Jacques Ellul in the technological system. Actually, the title in French is the Système Technicien, where he talks about the totalization of technological system with the help of communication networks and the computer's increasing capacity to process data. The book of Ellul was published in 1977. It is a theorization of the evolution of technical objects beyond Simondon's description. That is to say, one should pay attention to the evolution of technological system after the lineage of technical element, technical individual, and technical ensemble. According to Ellul, the technical system has already surpassed the technical ensemble because the cybernetic mechanism of auto-regulation enabled technical systems to possess an autonomy and totalizing power, and which I describe in chapter 4 of my book on digital objects. Now, the concept of system that was first popularized by German idealism and later systems theory in the 20th century has to be understood differently in view of its relation to technology. The concept of auto-position and auto-regulation could already be found in the 18th century philosophy of nature, especially in Schelling. It has inspired the ecology of Ernst Haeckel, the German biologist who defined ecology as, I quote, the science of relation between the organism and its external world, end of quote. These relations are articulated according to a recursive epistemology which reunites the living being and its milieu through a coupling. This coupling results in the concept of the Umwelt, which takes another name, structural coupling, in the contemporary biology of Francesco Varela and Roberto Maturana. For sure, we can trace it to Claude Bernard, Walter Cannon, and William Rose Ashby. But it is not our purpose here. I say this just to show that cybernetic thinking as a systemic, it's not systematic, but systemic thinking has penetrated all scientific domains and constitutes the base of an ecological thinking. Today when we talk about ecology, we are in fact talking about technological systems. It is very illuminating when Marshall McLuhan talks about ecology in an interview in 1974. He said the Sputnik created a new environment for the planet. For the first time, the natural world was completely enclosed in a man-made container. At the moment that the Earth went inside this new artifact, nature ended and ecology was born. Nature ended and ecology was born. Ecological thinking became inevitable as soon as the planet moved up into the status of the working earth. This commentary from McLuhan deserves our analysis because he says that ecology is far away from nature. Ecology starts when nature ends. The return to nature, which is the ecologists propose, is an illusion, as Bruno Latour has claimed in his book The Politics of Nature, that the ecologists should understand that nature is going to die, and in fact it should die. Ernst Haeckel's ecology is often associated with the romantic nature and Schelling's philosophy of nature. But what McLuhan says at bottom is a refusal of this association, and I would like to add to it that the becoming system of Earth has already started since the modern geology of James Hutton. And nature is in the process of being realized as a cybernetic system. The auto-positioning of the technological system exceeds the time when Simondon wrote Du Monde. And actually there are two slides I want to show at the very beginning. Of course, first of all, is not only the planetary computization, but rather the, I don't know how to say, call it cosmological or the computation of the whole universe. And of course, also transhumanism, and that is the technical actuality that we face today. Simondon saw that automatism in Du Monde to be far away from the perfection of technical object. Regarding automatism, he says it is nothing cybernetic. Automatism is nothing cybernetic. And the robot has nothing to do with cybernetic. He said in 1953. Therefore, the margin of indetermination in this case is not an exodus of the technical determination that we witness today, with all forms of advanced technologies, especially those associated with Elon Musk. Rather, its indetermination is only relative to a pure automatism. I have already questioned elsewhere if this critique of Simondon would already be valid in view of the complexity of today's algorithm, and the way we could still interpret the margin of indetermination in the face of technological systems. This challenge that we raise here is also an update on the questioning of Simondon's thinking and his his hope to reorganize the technical ensembles to resolve the problem of alienation. And it should be understood as an intention to identify and resolve a problematic which demands the invention of philosophical thought. If I attempt to show that there is a politics of allagmatic, and I will explain this term later, what does it mean by allagmatic in Simondon, it is for the purpose of elaborating on Simondon's project as a whole and the powerful thinking, his powerful thinking, and attempting to elucidate its relevance today. Simondon's concept of allagmatic deserves more attention since it is not only a concept but also a systematic thinking. And as emphasized, systematic, not systemic. Indeed, Simondon's critique of automatism is very much inspired by cybernetics, because cybernetics is a form of reflective thinking, but not determinative thinking. Reflective, but not determinative. I use the words reflective and determinative here in Kant's sense. As Simondon himself has made references to Kant, saying that it is only in the critique of judgments that Kant was able to deal with cybernetics. The cybernetic machine are different from the pure automatism, as the latter operates with mere repetition like clocks in the 17th century, or what is shown in Charlie Chaplin's Modern Time. In contrast, the cybernetic machines are developed according to a reflective epistemology like philosophical thinking. This reflectivity is presented in the relation between the technical individual and its associated milieu, as demonstrated by the gimbal engine. I suppose everyone knows how it works. No? There's a gimbal engine, so I will not explain. But the gimbal engine is called a technical individual precisely because it integrates the geographical milieu as part of its functioning. And the river, when the current is really fast, it will drive the turbine to produce more electricity. In consequence, it will produce more heat. But because the current is faster enough, so it will carry away heat. Yeah? So this is a holistic organization. And there is what he called recurrent causality between the associated milieu and the machine. Now this term recurrent causality is, in fact, the translation of one of the two central concepts of cybernetics, feedback. Simondon also used other translations for feedback, and I think we must pay extra attention, including internal resonance, counter-reaction, recurrence of causality, and circular causality. And I was completely, I was a bit astonished when I saw that internal resonance as well is also translation of feedback. And because the internal resonance has a very important role in the progress of civilization. Yeah. So in a way, he kind of uses cybernetics to understand the evolution of civilization. If we follow Ellul, as well as the systems theorists, such as Nicolas Luhmann and Elia Morin, we will see that the technical system is realized according to cybernetic epistemology, forming a totality which integrates the users with its operation, like Google and other platforms. The accomplishment of the technological system is also the accomplishment of metaphysics, if we paraphrase Heidegger here. Therefore, if we want to save the concept of margin of indetermination, we will have to consider a philosophy larger than ecology, like what Jean-Luc Barthélemy has recently proposed. A philosophy larger than ecology. If I'm right to identify the technological system with cybernetics, we would see the weakness of Simondon's critique immediately. As the remedy for the illness leads to another illness, just as what Nietzsche says in The Twin Lives of the Idols, that what philosophers, where Socrates, chosen to overcome decadence like a springboard, is in the end no more than the manifestation of decadence. And we have to be careful. In this case, can we talk about the margin of indetermination in the face of the totalizing technological system? A question for you. In order to answer this question, which I may call a paradox, I will try to give an interpretation of the concept of allagmatic and its relation to part 3 on the mode of existence of technical objects, which has also inspired me to develop the concept of Cosmo Techniques in my last book that Connor has mentioned before. Second part, the riddle of allagmatic. The concept of allagmatic for Simondon signifies a theory of conversion between operation and structure. As we know, Simondon was very critical of helomorphism and substantialism that was discussed earlier, because neither of these doctrines succeed in explaining individuation, for they attempt to do so with the help of beings that had already been individuated. For example, the form. If we use the form to explain individuation, naturally we use something that is already individuated, and this already individuated being, the form, has to be explained according to a theory of individuation. On the contrary, all this individuated being, for example, form or substance, has to be explained. According to a true theory of individuation, and which we can illustrate by two processes, crystallization and modulation. In the case the concept allagmatic could be explained, illustrated with two processes, crystallization and modulation. In the case of crystallization, there is a conversion of operation to structure, that is to say, the formation of crystalline with metastability out of the supersaturated solution. In the case of modulation, there is a conversion of structure to operation, like what we can observe in a child, which amplifies because the child has a grid between the anode and the cathode, and it can amplify or reduce the current with a voltage much lower and weaker than the voltage between the cathode and the anode. Operation and structure gives us a method for analyzing individuation of different beings: physical being, living being, and psychic being. Simondon himself says that, I quote, "Operation is the ontological complement of the structure, and the structure is the ontological complement of the operation." End of quote. In the sense of the, when he talks about the Cartesian cogito, he says, the act of thinking is seized objectively like a structure and subjectively like an operation. And so this is the two concepts that Simondon used to analyze thinking. It is in cybernetics that Simondon found a model of what he calls general allagmatic, because the mechanism of feedback pushes reflexivity to the front. Being is not determined by structure. Instead, it is always conversions between structure and operation. This separation between operation and structure gives us two modes of incomplete knowing. Thinking which privileges structure, like positivism of Auguste Comte and the criticism of Immanuel Kant in the Critique of Pure Reason, does not understand operation, and consequently they submit operation to structure and architectonics. On the contrary, Bergsonian intuitionism, which proposes a pure operation opposed to utilitarian operation, ignores the role of structure and therefore condemns geometrism. And we just to remind ourselves that in creative evolution, Bergson opposes the tendency of the intelligence to geometrize matter in static form to the élan vital, the vital current, in order to unify a theory of knowledge with a theory of life. What Simondon aims at is to found a new theory for studying individuation. The analytical method employed everywhere in Simondon's work is analogy. Because in analogy, Simondon sees a relation between two different beings in the analogy of structure and operation. For example, in Plato's Sophist, Socrates makes an analogy between the sophist and the fisherman, between the rich young boys and the fish. Even though they are of two different beings, it is through analogy, which is an operation between structures, that we can establish a relation between these two different settings: fisherman, fish, sophist, and the young boys. It is also through the Allagmatic that Simondon finds a possible reconciliation between archaeology and ontology that we talked about on the first day, which has been separated since the Greco-Roman epoch, for forming what he called an archaeo-ontology. The relation between cybernetics and archaeology resides in the fact that when one thinks of operation, one is also obliged to see a genesis of operations and structures, and therefore equally obliged to explain the transitions between them. For Simondon, the cause of these transitions or conversions consists in the presence and emergence of a problematic from which new value emerges through its resolution. Here, Simondon demonstrates a dynamism characterized by a third term beyond opposition and beyond different orders of magnitude, as ontology and Allagmatic. These are the dynamics of becoming inside a genesis, which also bears other names: individuation or ontogenesis. Allagmatic is a third term, not only beyond the opposition between operation and structure, but also that of positivism and cybernetics. However, it is also here we find a confusion, which I formulate in the following way. What consists of the difference between cybernetics and Allagmatic? Does Simondon want to say that cybernetics ignores structure? Therefore, it resembles a pure operation like the Bessonian intuitionism. However, if this is the intention of Simondon, he is obviously wrong, because Vienna has already refused an opposition between the Newtonian mechanism and the Bessonian vitalism in the first chapter of Cybernetics, published in 1948, that Simondon has read very carefully. This critique of Simondon seems to me lack of justification. It is true that in the article Épistémologie de la cybernétique, written in 1953, he wrote, "Cybernetics must be a universal revival of scientific work, not a series of marginal remarks appended to the sciences already instituted. Cybernetics, to be valid, must first be universalized." And I make reference to universal Allagmatic. Rather than defining its limit first, it would be necessary to found its intrinsic unity by giving it a method. Immediately after, Simondon says that in Wiener's 1948 Cybernetics, the cybernetic method is not yet defined. And a few lines later, he declares that we therefore believe that the most urgent work required by the new cybernetic theory is the construction of a cybernetic logic, which can be called a general Allagmatic. We have a difficulty understanding Simondon's commentary on cybernetics, which is at the same time emphasized and critical, because we don't see clearly how a more general cybernetic is no longer cybernetics but Allagmatic. And if I take up the question on a possible margin of indetermination of the technological system that I have invoked at the very beginning of the talk, we have a difficulty in articulating such a margin of indetermination if cybernetics is the scientific principle of technological system in the sense of Jacques Ellul, or even in the sense of Nicholas Luhmann. So should we conclude that the technological thinking of Simondon is at bottom an extended to cybernetics or a cybernetics stylized with French philosophy. And if the thinking of Simondon allows us to think of a program to organize information machines against the entropic becoming of the universe, and for resolving the antagonism between culture and techniques through the reticulated information machines, where can we identify the role of allagmatic thinking? In other words, is a Politics of Allagmatic postmortem. So I try to confuse everyone here, in order to show that what we understand about Simondon is actually it can be really confusing. Now, so what can we do? Of course, you can object to me by saying that my question is in itself a trap. Because on the model existence of technical objects, Simondon has never employed the term allagmatic. Then why didn't Simondon mention the word allagmatic on the model existence of technical object published in 1958, while this term was crucial for the reflection and preparation of this book, of both his theses, which is to say the preparatory articles written around 1953, for example, Philosophy and Cybernetics, Epistemology of Cybernetics. In an article titled, which Ashley has mentioned, Amplification in the Process of Information presented during the Colloque de Royaumont on the Science of Information in 1962, with the presence of cyberneticians such as Norbert Wiener and Donald Mackay. Simondon didn't invoke the word allagmatic neither. Was it because Simondon couldn't distinguish his approach from cybernetics anymore, and therefore he only gave light critique against cybernetics on the mode of existence of technical objects, but never a fatal attack? My question. Or did Simondon develop a politics of allagmatic on the mode of existence of technical objects, despite having abandoned the term allagmatic? Now, I wanted to argue precisely that allagmatic thinking is rather present in the mode, not only because Simondon often invokes a parallelism of operation and structure, but also because he takes up the method which is allagmatic for thinking, the genesis of technicity. And this is the fundamental difference between Simondon and Wiener. So how? This pathway of the mode of existence of technical object is a strange but also genial philosophical reflection on the possible integration between culture and techniques. And here, the concept of culture is much larger than the one introduced in the introduction. I will explain. Its speculative nature has perplexed the supervisor of this supplementary thesis, Georges Canguilhem, who said he couldn't understand what Simondon wanted to do. And therefore, we notice a special acknowledgement from Simondon to Canguilhem precisely on part 3. He thanks Canguilhem precisely about part 3 because Canguilhem couldn't understand it. Genesis signifies individuation. The genesis of technicity designates the individuation of technicity, starting with a magic phase, followed by constant bifurcation. And I would like to thank you very much, Simon, for his lecture yesterday, because he explained so well, much better than I can. We remind ourselves that in the magic phase, there is a distinction between ground and figure, but they are not completely separated. They are not detached. As the ground is the ground of figures, and the figures are the figures of the ground. The magic phase is characterized by a form of reticulation suspended by key points such as giant rocks, huge trees, and streams. Now I would like to show you this picture, just for not simply for entertaining. This picture is found in a children's book kept by Walter Benjamin. And it is a picture about the huge tree that was worshipped in Africa. It is a key point in the sense of Simondon. It's the key point that reticulates that created the reticulation. The magic phase is divided into two, technics and religion. They continue to bifurcate technology in theory and practice, religion in ethics and dogma. It is in this anthropological sense that Simondon gives us another relation between culture and techniques. Culture is no longer antagonistic to technology, but rather culture is that which maintains the reticulation as it is itself the technology of reticulation. It is also within this interpretation of this part of the part 3 of Du Mode that I have developed the concept of Cosmo Technique as the original techniques, technique, if we say it, which primarily means the unification between the moral order and the cosmic order through technical activities, an attempt to reunite the figure and the ground. The Cosmo Technique is also a response to the concept of multi-naturalism proposed by anthropologists such as Verelos de Castro, Philippe Descola, and others. Our friend Benoit has did a PhD here with Ian on Descola. No? At large, they propose, the anthropologists propose that there is a multiplicity of nature, but not only one, which is given by the modern episteme, by modern European episteme, which could be understood as opposition between nature and culture. And they propose therefore a multinaturalism. But like multinaturalism, it is possible to think a multiplicity of cosmotechnics, and that is why at the very beginning I questioned the definition of techniques and understanding of techniques. And I think a return to nature is not sufficient to respond to the ecological crisis and the technological systems that we witness today, because we don't deal with nature per se, but rather technicized nature, or what Simondon himself called a second nature. Or more precisely, technologized a technological system, and I have great doubt that we could resolve these technical problems with a non-technical concept such as Gaia. And this is my challenge to Benoit. In Simondon's understanding of techniques, which I assimilate as cosmotechnics, we don't find this innocent nature like the Natura Naturans and Natura Naturata of Spinoza. But neither do we see an unavoidable confrontation between technology and nature. Rather, the possibility of what Simondon called a co-naturality. The co-naturality, a very important concept, but Simondon didn't really elaborate. This co-naturality can only be grasped through the genesis of technicity and the problematics that emerge from this genesis. This problematic characterizes the modern epoch, that is to say, the ground is detached from the figure, which is modern technology, and this detachment of the figure from the ground is also what Deleuze called a transcendental bêtise, a transcendental stupidity. At that point in difference and repetition, he makes a reference to Schelling. And there's also a reading of Derrida, but we cannot get into that. Like many philosophers of science and technologies of his epoch, Simondon takes the Gestalt psychology as a holistic model for articulating the reciprocity between the past and the whole. So I quote, a long quote, but I think it worth reading it. Gestalt psychology, while recognizing the function of totalities, attributes force to form. A deeper analysis of the inventive process would no doubt show that what is determinant and plays energetic role are not forms, but that which carries the form, which is to say, the ground. The ground, while perpetually marginal with respect to attention, is what harbors the dynamism. It is that through which the system of forms exists. Forms do not participate in forms, but in the ground, which is the system of all forms, or rather common reservoir of the former's tendencies, where before they exist separately and constitute themselves as explicit system. The relation of participation that links form to ground is a relation that bestrides the present and diffuses an influence of the future onto the present, of the virtual onto the actual, for the ground is the system of virtualities, of potentials, forces that carve out their path, whereas forms are the system of actuality. At the beginning of part 3, Simondon starts by proposing going beyond the physical and technical concretization and to look for a convergence between figure and ground. If we take up the question concerning the margin of indetermination and technological system that we raised earlier, the response is no longer about finding a margin which shows the flexibility of operation within machines or systems, but to rethink the genesis of technicity by giving a new direction to technology through the search of the ground or a co-naturality. So I want to emphasize here that it is about giving a new direction to technologies. What does it mean by this? This is the ultimate difference between Simondon's allagmatic thinking and Wiener's cybernetics. In other words, Simondon takes this method much further from machine operations to the progress of civilization, of cultures. And I would like to give you an example from Simondon himself to show how this vision in his can be realized. This is from an interview on mechanology. Look at the antenna of television as it is. It is rigid, but it is oriented. We see that it looks into the distance and that it can be received signals from an emitter far away. For me, it appears to be more than a symbol. It seems to represent a gesture of thought, an almost magical power of intentionality. This is amazing, a magical power of intentionality of the antenna. A contemporary form of magic. In this encounter between the highest place and the nodal point, which is the point of transmission of hyperfrequencies, there is a sort of co-naturality between the human network and the natural geography of the region. It has a poetic dimension, as well as a dimension having to do with signification and the encounter between significations. There is this poiesis, which is not production, in the sense of technique, but cosmopoiesis. And that is why yesterday I said I wanted to identify the role of cosmology in this part of the monde. This cosmopoiesis is an identification of key points to attach the figure to the ground. And so this is an example of a concrete example of this seems to be spiritual and magical attempts to reunify figure and ground. In this co-naturality appears a thinking which looks for a convergence after constant bifurcations, the ground for the figure and the figure of the ground. When people encounter, for example, the clock of the observatory of the antenna or the antenna of television, some of them may show respect or disrespect of these technical objects. But according to Simondon, he says, this is example, a picture of, I don't know if it is really cosmopoiesis, but it is a picture taken by an artist called Jean Gérard, which was proposed by Robin McKay to be the book cover, the cover of my book on Cosmo Techniques, but I changed. So you can see that there is these pylons and and geography. No? Where am I now? I lost myself. So comment. Sorry, I forgot to put a quote. Oh no. So I forgot to put a quote here, but I read it. But I read it the other day also when Simondon says about the respect and disrespect of technical object. He says, I quote, these forms of respect and disrespect manifest within the technicity that is integrated into the natural and the human world, the inherence of values surpassing utility, thought that recognizes the nature of technical reality. Thought that recognizes the nature of technical reality is that which, going beyond separate objects, utensils, according to Heidegger's expression, discovers the essence and reach of technical organization beyond separate objects and specialized occupations. End of quote. This is the only occasion where the name Heidegger was mentioned in Du Monde, and it seems to be a response to Heidegger's 1949 Die Frage nach der Technik, where Heidegger wants to go beyond the anthropological question of the utility of technology to inquire into the essence of techniques. It is also in the same essay that Heidegger claims that the essence of modern technology is nothing technical, but rather enferming, Gestell, in the sense that the very big, every being is considered standing reserve or merely calculable resource. Then, what consists of this thought that recognizes the nature of technical reality, which Simondon mentioned? Towards the end of part 3, Simondon shows us the exigency of developing what he called philosophical intuition or philosophical thinking. And there was 3 types of intuition. No? There is a magical intuition, there's an aesthetic intuition, and philosophical intuition. This return to intuition is a reference to Besson, of course. But like his remark on cybernetics, Simondon proposes to generalize the method of Henri Besson without pitching the domain of intuition and matter in opposition to another. Intuition is the proper mode of becoming, and it surpasses the limit of the 2 modes of knowing, one by idea and the other by concept. The mode of knowing by concept belongs to a posteriorism, and the mode of knowing according to idea belongs to a priorism. A posteriorism takes up the analogy of operation and a priorism structure. Now, this is the general method of Simondon. You do opposition, and then you have the synthesis. But he says this is not dialectics, but what it is. So I quote here, a posteriorism which is empiricist, conceptualist, and partially nominalist, since knowledge, as it gains in abstraction, distances itself from elementary sources, defines knowledge as the operation that uses the concept. A priorism, on the contrary, being deductive, idealist, and realist, unless it is acosmic, defines knowledge through the grasping of the real by means of the idea. The 2 modes of knowing are identified respectively with technology and religion. So there is identification of these 2 modes of knowing with technology and religion. The opposition between these 2 modes of knowing and between techniques and religion, like the opposition between operation and structure, is now overcome by a third term, this time philosophical intuition. And that is why I insist that the allagmatic thinking is only present in Du Monde, because now it takes up the name philosophical intuition. And that is not Wiener, this is not Shannon we talked about. This signifies that the philosophical intuition is allagmatic in the sense of knowing. It is that which surpasses the positivism, which searches for the figure, and cybernetics, which searches only for the ground. Simondon says, intuition is neither sensible nor intellectual. It is the analogy between the becoming of knowing being and the becoming of the subject. The coincidence of 2 becomings. Intuition is not merely the grasping of figural reality like the concept, nor reference to the totality of the ground of the real in its unity like the idea. It aims at the real insofar as a form system in which a genesis occurs. It is the knowledge proper to genetic processes.